Hey, this is Tiqqle, and in this video, we're going over the 7 best ways to gear your main or even your ult in Shadowlands. Now that content is a little bit on the lower end of things, we're able to now focus on ults and maybe a few tips that you could take away to gear that next ult, get him up to a point where he'll get invited to groups. So make sure to check the timestamps below. And I know things are a little bit slow in WoW right now, so check out this game, Dragon Champions, who's the sponsor of today's video. Dragon Champions is a game where you can build your team out of tons of different champions, giving them upgrades of armor and gear to go against PvE and PvP encounters. When you level up your character, which is really easy and probably my favorite feature of the entire game, it makes it pretty easy. And of course, I'm gearing up my panda. Dragon Champions has come up with a ton of changes since the last time that I made a video with them, making upgrades to graphics, ways to follow and know what to do in the game with challenges and achievements. They've also come out with a lot of new champions, including one that looks like a shaman. My favorite new race is the half pigs. Now, half what I don't know, but I'm building an entire squad of them to run over my enemies. Also have the new race, the dwarves, with all different types of weapons to tool around. Now, of course, there's new boss fights and upgraded graphics that make them look even better. Now, there's different game modes, like I mentioned, like Battlegrounds, different PvP and PvP and PvE encounters, including campaigns, etc., but that's all expected. Now, what I'll tell you is this: there are so many champions, and it is some way that you can build up your forces by getting them over time. But if you use the code TIQGIF right now, you're able to get the Slinger and $10 of loot to kickstart your team as long as you're below level 15. So I recommend definitely check out the link below, use TIQGIF as the promo code, and we'll see you in there. Let's go ahead now and jump back to the video. All right, how to gear. First things first, and maybe something that I don't think a lot of people pay attention to, even though they end up doing it anyway in the long run, is campaign quests. A lot of people do a lot of preparation for getting to level 60, but frankly, the number one thing you can do is when you hit level 60, go through your campaign quest. When you go through this quest sequence, it will give you pieces of gear. That pieces of gear will actually go up in item level as you continue through the campaign, but these are also upgradable pieces of gear using anima. Now, a lot of people are saying that anima is quite a grind, but frankly, I think it's pretty easy and natural to start accumulating. It's also easy at a low item level, let's say around 150 item level, to do world quests for that anima to upgrade this gear. This gear can get upgraded up to seven ranks, and at that point it is 197, which is actually a pretty decent jumping off point to get into low mythic plus / RBGs, which we'll get into later. But this is a very good way and really a required way, so I recommend as soon as you get 60, just keep your head down, bucko, and just keep going through the campaign quest. It will give you the gear, do not disenchant it, and start plussing it up. Those gear pieces also will take spots, and those spots don't need to get replaced through other pieces of gear, like the other sources like we're going to talk about from PvE, PvP, or even the auction house. So if you're able to get an easy 197 gloves, belt, bracers, then you no longer need to go for those from the other sources we're about to talk about. The upgrading cost is actually not even that much. Upgrading from 50 anima to go to rank 2 up to 300 to go to rank 7. Frankly, that is only a few world quests or even the world boss, etc., and you're already farming that anyway. So this is the key way, and I don't think that everyone pays attention to this gear as you're getting it, and I think it's very important because, like I said, it's going to take those spots and quickly boost you. Now, going to the second easiest thing to do is, of course, the world boss. It's a free boss to kill and trying to get a piece of loot. If you get that piece of loot, it's going to jack up the eye level, and again, when you go to gear your ult, when you go to gear even your main, you want to think about how am I going to efficiently take care of let's say 5 slots of gear and then farm for the other 7 slots of gear. You want to see what you can get as a freebie and then go from there. Taking that approach will actually, in the long term, really help you gear, because in reality, it's probably going to take you up to 3 weeks to get above 200 item level. Unless you're able to get some higher arena rating, RBG rating, Mythic Plus, or if you're willing to grind that out. So I really think you need to look at gearing in a sense that it's going to take you 3 weeks or more to get to 210. And taking that approach, thinking week over week, especially you can actually use this same approach for gearing multiple characters, which I've done, where I've wanted to gear, let's say, 3 characters over the next month. It's actually a really good way to get to 210 across those tunes. Now, if it's your main, you're going to want to dump a lot of time into it, but we'll talk about how you can do that in a little bit. So the world boss, again, every week you'll have a chance at a piece of gear, as well as a conduit upgrade, which might be beneficial to you depending on your class. The next way 3, and the thing that it really depends if you have the money, is to buy BOEs from the auction house. A lot of people have told me, dude, it's so easy, just go and spend a little bit of money and it'll boost your iLevel quick. And again, that might be true for a few pieces of gear that you might want to say, hey, I don't, I only want to upgrade or buy 3 pieces of BOE from the raid or just general BOEs, and that'll help me kickstart my progress. I would say this, in reality, again, you need to think long term, and remember, Campaign Quest is going to give you 197s of about, 5 different pieces of your gear. BOEs, maybe that's for the rings, for other slots that you can't use that Campaign Quest to kickstart you with. Maybe it's for slots that the world boss doesn't give you. You can use raid BOEs or BOEs in general to fill some of those spots that aren't able to be easily attained through other means. Or it's a backup way, maybe at the end of the week when you've done everything else, you could fill in maybe 1 slot. I personally have never bought raid BOEs for any of my characters, just mainly because it is so easy to do a lot of gearing through other means, especially if you think about this from a week-to-week basis, not just an instant set gratification, like I know a lot of you weenies are thinking about. Now, raid BOEs, now of course, if you have a ton of money, you can dump those into the mythic, the heroic, the normal ones. But frankly, again, if you have the money, do it. It will accelerate things very fast, but make sure you're buying BOEs for the slots that are not going to be able to be plussed through some other means we're about to talk about. Now, the next one is the weekly quest. Now, sometimes weekly quests from the vault will give you a piece of loot. This is usually a heroic piece of loot for doing 4 mythics or something equivalent. That is a decent way. Actually, it's a solid way. You do, mythic, very low mythics, and you get it 213. Not shabby. You're going to be doing those mythics anyway, most likely, to get some other gear, especially if you're doing any PvE at all, which we'll talk about soon. But those weekly quests also vary, so sometimes it might be just to plus up your pets, which isn't going to help you very much. Now, after that, I think one of the most important ways, and I used to think that this was the most important way, especially if you're gearing alts or multiple alts, make sure you're getting the weekly vault. The weekly vault has actually changed since the launch of Shadowlands as well. The best thing you could possibly get on a low item level alt back when the game first came out, and even now, especially if you're doing a lot of PvP, is the PvP gear from the vault. Why? It is the only way to accelerate the rate at which you get conquest points. Hear me out. Let's say you're a PvPer and you're gearing an alt boomkin, let's say. Let's say you have, every BG, every whatever is going to give you so much conquest, but all of a sudden in your vault, even though you're 150 item level, you get the pants. That is going to save you, 700 conquests? That will accelerate the rate at which you catch up in a significant way. Even though that's at the lowest plus, even though it's at 207 item level, and it'll be a little bit before you get to 2100 if you're, an experienced PvPer, to upgrade that piece of gear, that is the best way to accelerate. So on all of my alts, every single week I make sure to get PvP vault option. And then recently, the weekly vault has been buffed by allowing it to drop PvP or PvE gear. That PvE gear equally. Again, you want to be going for upgradable pieces of gear. And in this case, many times, this gear is not upgradable, especially if you're doing high tier, Mythic Plus, etc. But the loot from the vault is still king. It will still give you an item level bump. The PvP side, a little bit easier in my opinion to plus up, especially with how rating is getting so inflated across the board. But frankly, PvE is okay too. Now, let's go ahead and go to the next topic, PvP. PvP, like I just mentioned, is a great way to gear. The gearing system is very good. The ability to get honor gear and being able to farm honor on your way from 50 to 60 is very strong, and I recommend you do that if you're trying to speed up your leveling. But again, what I recommend is you think about which pieces of gear you actually want to purchase that you will not get from your campaign quest of your Covenant, you won't potentially get from a BOE, you won't get from a world boss, and fill those pieces in using your PvP. An example would be a neck. A neck I could see people buying for honor right away because that doesn't drop from a lot of different sources, as well as rings, trinkets, etc. And not to mention the trinkets for PvP are pretty baller all around. Now, that is just the grinding aspect. The single best way in PvP to get gear and to farm that conquest is not to do arena. Arena is a filler if you're trying to strictly gear, and honestly, you're gonna be, 1/3 or half of a team that is extremely under geared. If you're at low gear, the single best way for you to gear, and you're not surprised by this, is rated battlegrounds. Rated battlegrounds have become an incredibly popular way to gear anything. Even for PvE, you can boost the shit out of your item level by jumping into rated battlegrounds and getting up to over 1100 honor for your first win, as well as up to 150 conquest for your first win. Now, don't get me wrong, honor's great, but frankly, it's just a means to an end. I would recommend you do not spend all of your honor, because when you start to get your conquest gear and you start to get a little bit of rating, if you're a PvPer, you need to be buffing that conquest gear, and that will definitely carry you, especially in the weapon department and in your main slots, to get that primary stat. So rated battlegrounds, now you might say to me, but Tiqqle, hey dude, I'm not high item level. How am I supposed to get into a rated battleground at 170 item level? The truth is this, a lot of streamers are playing with viewers. I recommend you try to get into some of those games potentially at a lower eye level. They can help, carry the weight of maybe someone that's under geared. The alternative option, I honestly think the best option, is form your own group. If you're an under geared person and you form a group, you can form a group around yourself that can really be beneficial. I hope you're not a healer, but that's okay. Now, if you do the leading part, make sure not to, don't sucker these guys into a game, but get ready to lead and get some basic strategies. I recommend checking out Oasis. They're an RBG community with a lot of strategies. Cherry PvP, I'll put the link down below in the description. She has a ton of guides, and that is a great resource for you. Now, if you're a healer and you do get some basic gear, you can now queue RBGs forever. It is the single best way to get gear. If you're a hybrid, a shaman, a druid, a paladin, you want to play the DPS spec, well, learn the healing spec, because you'll be able to get infinite queues of RBGs because there's so many going on. Grind out your gear that way, even for PvE. The reason I say even for PvE is if you get to a higher level using PvP, the number one thing is people discriminate based on eye level. They also base it on Raider IO as well as experience, but frankly, it's all about the eye level first. So you got to lock that in. So I recommend, healing those RBGs, which I've done on my alts, for free queues. So that's the PvP angle. Once you get more gear, you can do arena, but frankly, RBGs is the single best way to do it. Otherwise, if you're grinding honor is extremely limited in what it can gear you as. It's decent for right away to get your eye level to like 170, but frankly, it's a waste of honor after that point. It is not a good investment to start farming honor for just honor gear. You need to farm honor to plus your conquest pieces. That should be your goal. And of course, that's very challenging given you do need some rating requirement. But if you farm RBGs, 1400 above, you can get there with some grinding. Now, in terms of PvE, they did introduce the Valor system, which is a very interesting way that they've done it. They've made it so that if you do a +2 or you do a +400, you get the same amount of Valor points, which is pretty mind-boggling to me. You also will start to get drops in a +2 or a +400, and they will be different item level, of course, right? But the fact is this, it only takes Valor to plus it. If you get a ton of gear from +2s, it will require some grinding, but you get the same amount of Valor for finishing the dungeons. You might as well farm very quickly the items that you need in a lower Mythic Plus. If you're just gearing up, start farming 3s, 4s, 5s, whatever you can get your hands on for that dungeon that might drop that piece of gear you're looking for. And again, you want to be focusing on slots that aren't covered by your Covenant campaign, aren't covered by the BOEs you bought, aren't covered by the weekly quests you bought, or the weekly quests, or the vault gear that you've gotten. It all starts to filter down once you start to get a few pieces of gear locked into place. So Mythic Pluses is really a decent way to level, and a lot of people say, yeah, well, it's a grind. Yeah, well, you're playing an RPG. Now, the other thing I'll say about it, and a big shout out to Big Papa Panda, a daytime streamer I really like, I'll put his link down below as well. He said that if you do Mythic Zeros, you actually get a ton of gear a lot quicker than doing Mythic Plus. If you Mythic Plus and you do a timed key, you get about 2 pieces of gear, right? If you do a Mythic Zero, the gear, you don't get Valor, and I don't think the gear's upgradable, but you get 184 item level gear pretty quickly. But you can only do it once a week, each Mythic Zero once a week, I believe. So I recommend if you want to get PvE geared quickly, I would go through I'd do around the world Mythic Zero with some friends and go ahead and bang those out to get some potential gear. I would try to bring people of the same armor class to try to maybe help you out or even help them out if you already have covered those pieces of gear through your Covenant campaign, through your weekly quest, through your vault. It all kind of filters down. So those are the different ways that I recommend that you go ahead and farm and get gear. I do think that a lot of this you might know, but I think you need to approach them in this order to start to reduce the amount of grind needed. If you're a PvPer, you shouldn't feel when you get to 60 that you have to fill all your slots with PvP gear right away. That is unrealistic, and that is a crazy amount of farming. Similar to PvE. PvE, when you get to 60, you're going to say, oh my god, I can't get group. No, you can do this, and you need to look at gearing from a 3-week standpoint. You're not going to get uber geared right away unless you're BOE money bags. You need to look at the weekly progress that you can make and play it like that. I recommend also for Torghast, I'll give you a bonus tip, get into a 5-man group of Torghast. LFG has a Torghast section. Go ahead and start a group there. Again, starting groups is the single best way to get into a group. Guess what? It's your group. It might be a little uncomfortable at first, but you can get used to it. So again, these are my tips. Some of these might be surprises, some of them maybe not. I think that the Valor system has definitely made it easier for PvEers to get gear. PvP has been similar to the same model for this entire duration of the X-Pack. But with that being said, guys, let me know if you have any secret little tips for anyone down below. Put it down in the comments. Come by the stream and give tips, because this is the #1 question that I get asked, other than if I like Ellie or Enhance more. But with that being said, guys, I want to thank you for tuning in. I want to thank Dragon Champions for sponsoring this video. Guys, make sure to check out that game and the link down in the description to get those perks while they last. And with that being said, we'll see you in the next stream or the next video. I want to thank all the Patreons, all the subs. You guys are freaking awesome. We'll see you in the next one. Love you guys. Have a good one.